Welcome everybody for our Silicon Valley Clean Energy Board meeting for Wednesday, March 8th. And it's the start of a new era. It's after March 1st. So this is our in-person meeting. We're reverting to the original Brown Act rules. And let's go ahead and get started with a call to order. We've done that. So now how about the roll call?
Yes, thank you. I'll start with you, Chair Tyson.
Here.
Vice Chair Walia.
Here.
Scozola.
Here.
Mohan.
Here.
Meadows. Rennie.
Here.
Chua.
Here.
Mekachuk.
Present.
Abekoga.
Here.
Klein.
Here.
Lee. Participating remotely, Director Hilton.
Here.
Alternate Director Carruthers.
Here.
Thank you, and we do have a quorum.
Great. We have even better than a quorum. We have a full house. That's better. So let's go ahead and move on to public comment. If you see on the agenda some of the rules for public comment, let's see if we have any public comment from here in the room first. I do not see any, so let's move to any public comment on Zoom. I can't see that, so
No comments.
no comment. In that case, let's close the public comment. Let's move on now to our consent calendar and for action. And you see the items in front of you. And let me look for, is there any desire for anyone to pull an item from the consent calendar? I do not see any here on the person. And then how about on Zoom? I don't see any. Oh, I can see both of you. This is great. And then do we have any public comment on items on the consent calendar? In the room, I do not see any.
None online, Chair.
All right. In that case, I'd be looking for a motion.
Got a motion to approve the consent calendar?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Let's go with the roll call vote.
Thank you. Chair Tyson.
Yes.
Vice Chair Walia.
Yes.
Director Scozola.
Yes.
Mohan.
Yes.
Meadows.
Yes.
Rennie.
Aye.
Chua.
Aye.
Mekachuk.
Aye.
Abekoga.
Aye.
Klein.
Aye.
Lee.
Aye.
Hilton.
Aye.
Carruthers.
Aye.
Thank you. That motion carries.
Great. Thank you very much. Let's move on to our regular calendar, the item number 2, and that is receive audit results and accept the findings from an independent auditor. And so we have from our staff, will that be Amrit, you?
Good evening, directors. So I'm pleased to inform the board that the independent auditors from Presenti and Brinker have completed the financial audit. As you know, that our fiscal year begins October 1 and ends on September 30th of each year. So this is the financial audit for the fiscal year that ended September 30th, 2022. So what happened when just before the fiscal year ended, the auditors met with the audit committee in September of last year, and they went through the plan for how they were going to proceed with the audit. The audit committee had a chance to engage with the auditors, ask questions about the audit. Shortly thereafter, the audit began, and we've been engaged, both staff and our accountant, Mahar Accountancy, engaged with the independent auditors. I'm pleased to inform that they have completed the audit, and upon completion of the audit, they presented the findings to the audit committee, which met on February 16th. The audit committee had a chance to ask questions and unanimously voted to to recommend that the board receive and accept the results of the audit. So with that, I'm pleased to turn it over to Kellen Gilbert and his team from Presenti and Brinker, and he will also give an overview of the audit. This is an action item. After his presentation, we do ask that the board vote and to receive and accept the audit. But this is also a chance to engage with the auditors and ask any questions you may have. So with that, I'll turn it, if there are no questions, I'll turn it over to Kellen.
Thank you. Let's move ahead to the first slide. So my name is Kellen Gilbert. I am the lead audit partner from Presenti and Brinker. I've been in public accounting for 16 years, 14 of which have been specializing in performing audits for government entities. Alejandra Schaefer was the engagement supervisor. She's been working on government engagements and CCAs for the last 3 years. Next slide, please. So as you just heard, the audit was completed. And based on our audit, we are issuing an unmodified opinion, which is that the audit, the financial statements, in our opinion, are free of material misstatements and are factually accurate. And we also issued another report stating that there were no significant deficiencies in internal controls. Next slide, please. I really like to start with this slide anytime that it's a public presentation, just to remind the board and also the public of what the relative roles and responsibilities are over the financial statements. There's a lot of confusion in this area of people's expectation for what exactly an auditor does. Many people believe that auditors actually prepare the financial statements. Actually, management is responsible for the preparation of the financial statements. Management is responsible for all the financial data within the financial statements and maintaining a system of internal control to guarantee the accuracy of that financial data. We as the auditors, we are responsible for providing our opinion on whether or not we think those financial statements are materially accurate. We do that using what we call a risk-based approach, which means we consider the different risk factors of whether or not certain sections within the financial statements could contain a material misstatement. We gain an understanding and evaluate internal controls, again, to help us with our risk-based analysis. We then perform tests of year-end balances and analytical and other types of procedures over those balances to make sure that they are, in fact, materially accurate. We also review the financial statements to make sure that the disclosures meet all the required standard disclosures, as well as we review them for accuracy, making sure that they're without bias, meaning that the information within the financial statements are just factual and, again, in accordance with professional standards, and that there's no additional unnecessary, potentially biased information in those disclosures. Next slide, please. So again, our risk-based approach, which is what our entire auditing procedures are based off of, starts with gaining an understanding of the entity's operating characteristics, your accounting policies, practices, procedures. We use our knowledge of similar CCAs that we audit for best practices, and we review those internal controls over significant transactions, making sure that there's proper oversight, segregation of duties, and just generally best practices for internal controls over the various accounting functions for the financial statement. Next slide, please. So this is just a brief list of the significant areas of our audit focus. Just because something isn't listed here does not mean that we did not pay it, a relevant amount of attention. But these are just some of the more significant areas that we wanted to specifically call to your attention that were addressed. Revenue recognition is always significant area of focus. We test accounts receivable and revenue by reviewing a sample of customer billings. We relate total cash received during the year to total revenue and reconcile the differences. We look at cash received subsequent to year end to substantiate that accounts receivable balances existed at year end. And we make sure that revenue is being recognized throughout the year on a consistent basis, and that management is applying the appropriate accounting policies, not just at year end, but throughout the year. Next slide, please. Cash, obviously, an important area to the financial statements. We send confirmations to third parties to gain audit evidence that that cash does in fact exist and is valued correctly. We review the accrued cost of electricity, reviewing subsequent bills and cash payments to make sure that that accrued cost of electricity is being calculated consistently and accurately. We test other liabilities by reviewing contracts, subsequent cash disbursements, making sure that that those liabilities are recorded and that liabilities are complete at year end. And as I previously mentioned, we spent a lot of time reviewing the financial statement disclosures, again, making sure that they're complete in accordance with the professional standards and without bias. Next slide. Specifically, I wanted to call out this for this slide because it's new for this year. Because you expended over $750,000 of federal funds in the fiscal period ending 9/30/2022, you are subject to what's called a single audit, and this is actually a separate second standalone audit that we conducted simultaneously with our normal financial statement audit. The difference is that this is a compliance-based audit over the CAP program. So again, you are subject to this because you spent over $750,000 of federal funds. This is applicable to all government and nonprofit agencies that meet that requirement. And so we have to perform a compliance-based audit to make sure that those funds were spent in accordance with the grant agreements, with various compliance rules and regulations that are all stipulated by the federal government, making sure that the costs were allowable and the funds were reported correctly. And you'll see this year in the financial statements that there's a schedule of expenditures of federal awards, which is the actual document that shows how much federal awards were spent in that fiscal year. So in addition to testing the compliance over the federal expenditures, a single audit is unique because we are required not just to observe and gain an understanding of internal controls, but actually to test to make sure that those internal controls are functioning properly. So again, for each one of the compliance requirements that are direct and material, for Silicon Valley, we had to not only test compliance, but we also had to test those internal controls over that. Next slide, please. One other new factor for the audit this year was the implementation of the Governmental Accounting Standards Board Statement Number 87 leases. So this was a big change from previous years. In the past, operating leases have been recorded outside of the statement of net position, what we would say accounting slang for off balance sheet, meaning that the liability for those operating leases would not appear on that statement of net position, even though there was a contractual liability for those future payments, which was previously disclosed in the financial statements. So the GASB came along, I believe back in 2016, and issued this statement stating that now going forward, the non-cancelable portion of operating leases should appear on the statement of net position as a lease liability, and that government agencies should record an offsetting right to use intangible asset, basically representing the government's right to use that leased asset. So incorporating and adopting that accounting policy change resulted in an approximate $1.3 million lease liability and corresponding right to use asset being recorded in the statement of net position during the fiscal year. Next slide, please. The last couple slides are just basic communications that we as auditors under professional standards are required to communicate to those charged with governance, which is obviously the board and the finance committee. So again, these are just required standard communications. We did not propose any material adjustments to the financial statements. We did not identify any significant or unusual transactions of which there was lacking of authoritative guidance. Basically, there wasn't any transactions where we in management were unsure of how these accounting treatments should be treated. Basically, everything was cut and dry. Next slide, please. We didn't have any disagreements with management. There were no issues with the scope of our audit, meaning that we were provided access to all the information that we requested without any sort of barrier. And additionally, we didn't have any difficulties or disagreements with management during the course of the audit. So again, these are required communications that professional standards wants us to have an open dialogue with the overall performance of the audit and feel that this is important for the board to know. Next slide. I just wanted to also just state that not only did we not have any disagreements with management, but overall the audit went very smoothly. We appreciate the assistance that management provided so that we could complete the audit timely and get the financial statements issued in a timely manner. And so that we do appreciate all their help. And I'm happy to answer any questions on the financial statements or on any of our any of our auditing procedures that we performed or any of the new items for the 2022 audit.
Great, thank you, Kellen. Thank you for that report. And I have a favorite thing when it comes to audit reports, and that is no surprises. And I think you delivered on that. I do believe let's hear from our audit chair before we take questions for you, because we had Director Megachuk was our audit committee chair, and perhaps you have a few words.
Sure, I'll make just a few comments. It's almost like there should be a slide that says, here's what the audit committee does. But as Amrit said, that management is responsible for the financial statements, and the audit firm reviews those. And there's a couple of key points that they look at that are important to me, I think, that are pretty key, that they're looking at internal controls from an overall perspective, and that's always a good thing. And although we received the financial statements monthly and quarterly, annually there's the note disclosure, and there's a lot of information in the notes, and they review the note disclosure and make sure that that's fine. So that gives me a lot of confidence. I think another point is many of the people on the board have seen this single audit in their own municipalities. And, so we're seeing it here, but it's something that everyone sees as well. Probably the other 4 key points that our auditor made was there were no proposed adjustments, no unusual transactions, no disagreements with management on the accounting, and management was easy to work with. So, as you said, no surprises. It's a clean audit opinion. That's what you want. So, the audit committee was pleased with those results.
All right, I think we all want to thank you, Director, as well as the rest of the audit committee for your oversight of this activity. And then let's just see, do we have any questions or comments from directors? I do not see any in the room, and I don't see any hands raised on Zoom. So thank you for that. And then let's see if we have any public comment. I will look in the room. I do not see any. And online?
None online, Chair.
None online. All right. In that case, we've had a discussion, and so I think it's time to take a motion on the audit, accepting the audit report.
So moved.
Thank you, Director Lee. And Director Klein looks like a second. Okay, very good. Let's go with the roll call vote.
Thank you. Chair Tyson,
Yes.
Vice Chair Walia,
Aye.
Dr. Skolzola,
Aye.
Mohan,
Yes.
Meadows,
Aye.
Rennie,
Aye.
Shua,
Aye.
Mekachuk,
Aye.
Abekoga,
Aye.
Klein,
Aye.
Lee,
Aye.
Hilton,
Aye.
Carruthers.
Aye.
Thank you. That motion carries.
Great. Thank you very much. And thank you to the auditor if he's still there. Yes, thank you, Kellen, for your work.
Thank you very much.
Appreciate it. Let's move on to item number 3, the CEO report for discussion, and that would be our very own favorite CEO, Girish.
Chair Tyson, members of the board. So a few updates. First, I'd like to introduce our newest employee. Some of you met him before the meeting. So I'll call Doug Bernard up to the podium to introduce himself. He will be working for Justin Zagunis in the DPP group. We're very happy that he has decided to join SVCE. He has a background in public finance, investment banking at RBC Capital Markets, and he's worked with municipal utilities and local governments on a number of transactions. So, Doug, would you come on up and introduce yourself, please?
Nice to meet everyone. I had the pleasure of meeting some of you at dinner. My name is Doug Bernard. I'm a decarbonization management analyst. And as Girish mentioned, some of my background is in public finance, investment banking, working with local governments and municipal utilities. I then joined a energy efficiency business in Massachusetts, where I was chief of staff to the CEO, working on special projects across the company. And I helped start a new business unit, which was residential electrification, and eventually we spun that out as a separate operating company. I'm excited to join SVCE, really got along with the team, and the mission really resonated with me, so those were the two key reasons why I was excited to join. And just a couple of personal facts about myself. New resident to California with my wife. We moved out here because she got a new opportunity, and so we live in the East Bay, and we've really enjoyed getting to know the Bay Area and exploring, going to Big Sur, Muir Woods, and just doing some hiking. So thank you for your time. Excited to work with you.
Oh, thank you, Doug. And by the way, the beautiful snow on our mountains, it's here all the time.
Thank you.
Thank you, Doug. Kevin Armstrong, Deputy Director of Administrative Services, along with our directors, he's led the effort to hire more employees. You had authorized us hiring 10 additional employees. So we have, in addition to Doug, 4 more who have accepted offers, and they will be joining us in the next 45 days or so. And we'll have 2 more in the DPP group, 1 in finance and 1 in 4Pro. And we still have more hires to do, so this will get us to about 40 or so, and we'll have about 9 left. Talking about hydro, Chair Tyson, we have the current hydro situation is such that we have about 150% of the average snowpack for this time of the year. So it looks quite good compared to previous years, and we'll keep you updated on that because it has the potential to have impacts on market prices. Wanted to update you on some contracts that will be coming to you in the coming months, most likely in April. Last month we talked to you about reliability. Monica and Charles provided you quite a comprehensive presentation on reliability, the need for gas resources to continue to stay on the system, and also the penalties that we'll be facing later this year. We still haven't got the penalty notice from the CPUC. So we are negotiating a contract with a long-term contract to buy capacity from a natural gas unit. We hope to bring that to you next month. We also have a PPA for biomass power that is for greater than 5 years. It's actually less than 5 years, but I don't have the authority to enter into that because we don't have a standardized contract with this entity. So you'll be seeing that too. It's a 3-year contract for biomass power. Also wanted to update you on Diablo Canyon. You've seen the news over the last month or so, and then just a few days ago, there was news that the units can continue operating while the Nuclear Regulatory Commission considers PG&E's application. So that's the latest on Diablo Canyon. With that, everything else I have to report is in my short 2-page report. I'll be happy to answer questions on what I presented or on the report.
Great. Do we have any questions for our CEO? I see Director Mekachuk.
Yes. We mentioned, or the auditor mentioned the lease of the building and your staffing up. What are your real estate capacity and are people working remote? Is it a blend? I'm just curious about that.
It's funny you ask as of today. We are mostly remote. Command performance every quarter for 2 days for everyone to show up. And we have a lot of connection-related meetings, team building, for that. We're going to provide I think there's really a need for some folks have a need to come back to the office, including myself. I think where we were 2 years ago is different than where we are today. It's a bit flippant, but I think there's some truth to what I'm going to say. For 100 years, the extroverts had it really good in the office, right? The introverts were like, geez, all these people, they all want to be together. The last 2 years were great for introverts. Now, let's get the best of both worlds. The extroverts who want to show up in the office maybe once a week. We'll probably target a day, have them come in. Maybe it's twice a week. Board meeting day would be a great day for people to come in. Exec committee day would be a great day for people to come in. So we feel a sense of community when we come back. So, yeah, so that's actually something we just started talking about. I'll be bringing that up with the rest of the staff. And as far as real estate needs in the long term, our lease expires 2024. So there are some options on what we want to do for the long term. It also has to do with how we utilize our reserves. So we'll bring that to you as part of the next year's budget, the full year budget. We'll bring you some options on what we want to do with that.
Great, thank you. Any other questions, comments? I don't see any hands raised on Zoom, so thank you very much for that report. And that means it's time to move on to item number 4, which is adopting a resolution approving the mid-year 2022-23 adjusted operating budget. I noticed Amrit didn't budge after that last one. He was planning ahead. Very good. Why don't you go ahead with your report?
Trying to be efficient. So I'm pleased to bring the mid-year adjusted operating budget. Most of you know we do this mid-year because we deal with a very volatile commodity. So we set the annual budget in September of each year, and then we take another look at it and adjust it at mid-year, which is what we're doing today. And I'll go through in more details the timeline of our budget process for our newer members, but we'll go with the next slide, Andrea. So this is an action item. At the end of my presentation, we'll be asking the board to take a vote to adopt the resolution approving the adjusted mid-year operating budget. The areas I'm going to talk about, I'm going to go through the budget timeline. So newer members are familiar with our, board members are familiar with the budget process. I will highlight the changes to this proposed budget since the adoption of our annual budget. And then I'll compare it some of the key line items so the board members are aware of key changes to the budgeted items. We'll review some of the changes. Major changes will be on the revenue side, so we'll explore that. And the other big change, as is always the case, is on our energy procurement expenses. Then I'll do a quick review of our reserve projections, another brief update on staffing. Grish already provided a good update, and then we'll take a vote. So with that, we can go to the next slide. So this is our timeline. We begin the process for budget actually a little bit before August. What we do, if you remember, we do a stress test analysis that we present to the committees in May, and we present it to the board in June, or we presented it last year and we plan to do so again this year, where we look at adverse events that can have material financial impact on us. And so we want to basically make sure when we adopt the annual budget, we have good targets for what we should be targeting in our reserves so we can withstand those adverse events. So we kind of start this process right now. We're doing the stress test analysis. We presented a proposal to the Finance Committee on the 27th of last month. We were taking it to the Risk Oversight Committee, and then we'll be doing the analysis in August, present the findings in May, and bring it to the board in June. So that's one part of the budget process. The other part is the strategic plan discussion Grish talked about. That influences how we shape the budget. And in June, we talked about the frameworks of the budget with the executive committee, and if we have finance committee meeting, with the finance committee as well. Then in July, when there's no committee and board meetings, we do the analysis. And then very early in August, we present the findings to the Finance Committee. We take that feedback very quickly, turn it around for the board meeting in August. So in August is when we have the full policy level discussions. We don't tend to do that in the mid-year budget. This is sort of an adjustment, but good policy discussions, we do that in August so that when we bring the budget for adoption in September, there are no surprises. We've incorporated board's feedback, and the board can easily adopt the budget in September. So when we start the fiscal year in October, we have a approved budget in place. And then in December timeframe, if this is a critical time because this is when CPUC adopts PG&E's rates, which has quite a bit of an impact on our rates and therefore our revenue. So we take another look to see if there are any actions the board may want to take, like last year when the board decided to update the discount rate, customer discount rate, as well as provide additional funding, because based on what we saw was likely to transpire, the CPUC decision, our rate projections looked good in terms of what our margins would be. And as I mentioned, on February 27th, we had a meeting with the Finance Committee. So we took the mid-year budget, and the Finance Committee voted unanimously and recommends that the board adopt this mid-year adjusted operating budget. So this is where we're, as I said, updating it for our energy procurement portfolio costs based on latest market prices, based on any portfolio changes, account for the board decision in December that affects our rates, as well as the final rate that went into effect starting January 1st of this year. And at this meeting, we're bringing that budget for the board's approval. Feel free to ask me any questions on the timeline or as I go throughout the contents of the presentation. Andrea, next. Thank you. So the highlights, I'm very pleased to say this is looking to be a very good year. We have a healthy, if the assumptions that make up at the time we did the analysis prevail, as you know, what I mean by that is mainly the energy prices. The power prices goes up and down every day. But at the time we composed the analysis, the projections look good. We're looking to contribute about $73.4 million towards our reserves, in building the reserves up to withstand some of those stress conditions that I talked about. This is a reduction from $115 million that the board adopted in September for the annual budget, and I'll walk through those changes. But remember, when the board adopted that budget, the board at that time said they were going to take further consideration of the customer discount rate and additional spending in December once the CPUC rates were the decision that CPUC was likely to take we'd have better insights on. And we knew that this was a very high number, so when the board met, we did say that at December that the projections looked good. And that's when the board decided to increase the customer discount rate from the budgeted 2% to 4%. So an additional incremental 2% customer discount. So that in terms of budget, that's about $10 million of reduction is accounted for by the increase in customer discount by 2%. The other action the board took was to further fund our decarbonization programs, and there are two big programs the board adopted. One was $9.5 million towards our new all-electric rate. Additional discounts were provided for customers who will take on that, participate in that rate, and another $9.5 million for multi-family direct install program for low-income customers and multi-family dwellings. So that explains $19 million of the reduction. And then, as I said, we updated the portfolio for energy prices. And as you'll see in my presentations, energy prices have been very volatile. Grish talked about it at the last board meeting. Natural gas prices have been very, very high. Natural gas prices on the margin sets electricity prices, and that drove electricity prices very high in the months of December, January, and parts of February. So that, along with forward projections for the forward months as to where the market is trading right now, when we account for those adjustments, that increases our expenses by $67 million. Then there are pluses that basically dampen some of these cost increases, and that's the increased revenues. When the CPUC adopted PG&E's final rates, we saw the PG&E's adopted rate was actually higher than what we had projected. The PCIA, at the time we set the budget, we thought it was going to be 0, came in slightly higher, about 0.28 cents or so a kilowatt hour. But the PG&E rate increased way more than we had anticipated, and that, in terms of dollars, means we were projecting to bring in additional revenues of $50 million as a result of that. So our rates went up to our customers while we're still maintaining a very good customer discount rate. So customers are getting a very good discount rate, 4%. And remember, there's still the 1% that the board approved, 1% of discount translated in dollar bill credits to low-income customers. So they're getting about additional $12.50 a month in discount for 8 months, and on a very heavily discounted rate to begin with. So all in all, from a budget perspective, that's a 5% discount. And then the other favorable movement is, remember, the board adopted a new investment policy, and we said we were taking a new approach in how we were investing our reserves. And that we're projecting is bringing in $3 million additional funds. But the interest rates market, the fixed income market, looks really good, and we actually think we can do better than $3 million. It will probably be likely the case if the market conditions prevail. And then the $1 million in operating expense savings, that's primarily coming from vacancies we have that we have not been able to fill. So that's primarily funding that $1 million reduction. So when I take all of that, that explains the $42 million reduction. So that's the walkthrough from 115 to the 73.4 million. Okay. If there are no questions, I will move on and go a little bit more details. But this is the summary slide that sums up the major changes to the budget. So here are the key line items. You'll see what I said in the previous slide, but in more details. You can see the revenue line increasing. It's not showing 50 million, but because remember, 10 million is for 2% customer discount, so 50 minus 10, you see 40 million. You see the $9.5 million for our decarbonization program. So all in all, it's a very good budget, supports an overall customer discount of 4% for all customers, additional bill credits to our low-income customers, and we're transferring close to $31 million towards our decarbonization programs. So it's a very good budget and contributing a healthy amount to our reserves to withstand some of the risks that we face in this business. So a little bit on the revenue side, a little more detail on the explanation. So this is what I'm illustrating here. When we set the budget, we thought PG&E's rates were going to come in at 12.95 cents a kilowatt hour. They came in at 14.96. PCI came in slightly higher. So our rates, our overall margin improved by 11%, and these changes went in effect January 1st. So this is explaining the additional 50 million, and then you take away the 2%, so additional 40 million in revenues. Okay. Now our power supply expense, there's a chart on the left. It's meant to give you the illustration on the volatility of this energy market, but there's an expanded slide with more details in the appendix. You can see the prices have peaked there, and that's the gas price movement that I was talking about. Gas prices went up, so our power prices went very high, much higher than the budgeted at the time we set the budget. So that is a big part of what's driving the $67 million increase, about 32 million of that. And then the marketplace has become very expensive for carbon-free products. So we buy carbon-free attributes. That's become very expensive. Also, the RPS, the clean energy, the renewable attributes, that market has become extremely tight, and those prices have come up significantly, and that's contributing 13 million to this year's physical budget. And the other, you can see resource adequacy. Monica and Charles explained the problem in this market. It's very expensive. There was a detailed explanation at the last board meeting, which showing 6 million, you might say, well, that seems low. It's just because at the budget time we had already projected a very high RA cost, and it's even higher now by 6 million for this budget. And the California ISO cost, some of it had to do with prior period adjustments, namely from the heat wave we had in September, and then some of this has to do with the way the CAISO runs its operations. Prices are high, they're not able to account for some of the costs, so they peanut butter it across, call it what do they call it? Unaccounted for energy or neutrality costs. So that has been very high this period because of high prices as well. So all in all, when you add these factors with some minuses on our CRR, these are revenues we get from transmission line allocations that are given to us. I can go into details, but that's a small part of this movement here. $2 million reduction. So all in all, that explains the $67 million increase. Okay. So reserve projections. What does this mean for our reserves? As I said, we will be refreshing what our numbers should be. Last budget cycle, when we did the stress test analysis, when we looked at the risk the agency is facing, we increased our target from 235 days to 285 days because we said we need that level of reserves to withstand the volatility we face in the markets, driven by uncertainty in power prices and the way we hedge our portfolio, the way movement in prices can adversely affect us, not just in power procurement supply, but namely how it affects our revenues via PCIA charges and PG&E rates. We will update the stress test analysis, and we will revisit if these are the right targets, but the reserves projections look good. And if we take into account the unspent program dollars, we're projecting, if this projections prevail, we'll end at 265 days of cash on hand. But if we take out the unspent dollars, that would be about 219 days of cash on hand. And of course, there's a lot less certainty further out we make projections, but we do make projections. And when we do the stress test analysis, there'll be a lot more focus in the first 2 years, but we do look at the other 3 years, and I'll go through that criteria at that time as to how we set that target. Okay. In this slide, we're just giving a Personnel update, actually Grish already provided this update. At the time we set the budget, we had 14 vacancies, but as Grish mentioned, we have addition of Doug now, so we have 13 vacancies, but we have 4 new hires already accepted and coming on board, so that brings it down to 9 vacancies, and we'll be actively filling these. But we're not asking for any additional headcounts in this budget cycle. But when we do the annual budget, we will likely ask for more headcount in our decarbonization programs, because those programs are expanding, and we need a lot more people to basically be able to implement all the new programs that we have designed and will be designing. Okay, so that's about all I wanted to share about the budget. So in summary, it's looking to be a good year, but as always, I want to remind, as a risk manager too, I want to remind there are many uncertainties out there, and we want to plan for those uncertainties. So we do, and the way we plan for those, the best risk mitigation we have for all the uncertainties we face, some of that I listed on the right side there, is having healthy reserves. Once the reserves are gone, we don't have that water in the bank that we can use for the drought years. So we want to make sure we have healthy reserves, and with this budget projection, we'll be adding to that reserve fund and further strengthening our risk posture. It's a good budget. We're furthering our mission by adding additional 19 million, all in all, as I mentioned earlier, 31 million towards our decarbonization programs. We have the all-electric rate discount that the board adopted in December. We have additional bill relief for low-income customers. All customers get a 4% discount, so it's a good budget. And as I mentioned, we will do additional stress test analysis, and we'll bring all those and any other policy level changes for considerations to the board when we do the annual budget. With that, I'm happy to take any questions.
Great, thank you. And to repeat myself from earlier, no surprises. Keep that going. And I think, did we have Director Lee's hand up?
Yeah, first of all, Amber, thank you very much for the good news, and this is a very helpful report. And as we recall, when we first voted on this a couple months ago, we didn't know what the rate's going to be. We're just guessing what the rate is when we gave that 4% discount from the PG&E rate. So it's a bit of a speculation, but our speculation was correct. And as expected, the PG&E rate was much higher than we even thought about. And you mentioned that's partly because of the CPUC approving it based on the natural gas prices getting so high. I'm sure it's a lot to do with the Putin war and all that going on in the world market, why natural gas prices so high. So in terms of the risk for us moving forward, one of the risks, of course, is if the rates were to go down in the future, that's when that could affect our reserve. Could you elaborate on that, how that would affect us?
Yeah. So we want to provide a good value product, which we are, very clean energy, along with other value-add services like decarbonization funds. But we want to do it from a position of competitive strength. We want to be able to provide a very competitive rate. So we have to look at where PG&E, the biggest competitor we have, where their rates are. And their rates, if prices drop, we don't have insights into how they manage their portfolio. We have some understanding of how they do it. There's some public information that we use in modeling. When prices drop, their rates tend to drop, right? Our rates, but the other big impact, remember there's the PCIA, the power charge indifference adjustment. So this is, just as a reminder, when our customers were PG&E customers, PG&E made commitments on behalf of those customers. And when customers left PG&E says, hey, those commitments kind of go with you. And commitments in the sense of stranded cost in the sense that what they bought power on behalf of those customers relative to where the market is right now. If the market is higher, then it's in the money. PG&E doesn't have a problem. Hopefully that comes back to us in a form of negative PCIA. But the PCI has always been positive. This year, for some CCAs, some vintage CCAs, depending on when they left those customers left PG&E systems, some of those rates actually did this time go negative for the first time. But basically, the risk to us is if prices drop, that stranded cost grows. Right? PG&E says, hey, I bought it at this high price. I can only sell it at the market at this lower price. That difference you customers need to pay up. So that PCIA charge goes up and PG&E's rates can come down. And all of that means, for us to be competitive, we have to charge a lower rate. If you remember, not the last fiscal year, the fiscal year prior to that, the board knew we were going to have an operating loss. We were going to have a loss. But we chose to maintain a discount of 1% for all our customers. So the risk is prices coming down. And generally, prices coming down you'd think is good, but we forward hedge our energy purchases. So we will not see a commensurate drop in our portfolio costs, especially for the year ahead. But but our revenues can drop quite a bit, right? So our revenues can drop, but our purchase cost doesn't drop, and that can create a squeeze on our margin and can put us in an unprofitable position. So we want to make sure we have adequate reserves, and the way we did the stress test is we looked at a scenario, what if prices collapsed? Mm-hmm. And there's something we anticipate doing this year is looking at economic recession. What if an economic recession takes hold? This is what we're planning on for a stress test. What could that mean? Prices could come down, and our procurement cost doesn't come down, our revenues goes down. So if you want to maintain a competitive rate, that means a substantial draw on reserves. So that's one of the big risks we're talking about. And of course, there are other risks like regulatory uncertainties, and there are some proceedings before the CPUC that can have some severe adverse impacts on us.
And when a situation like that happens, we certainly can still vote to change the percentage. Let's say we're running at a loss. Instead of the 4% discount, we might go back to the 1% discount, let's say. That's another way for us to lower our or increase our revenue in that sense, correct?
Yes, the board has many levers. The board can choose to not even offer at a discount, but there are some consequences which we will discuss at that point. You can charge a higher rate. You can, divert funds within that have been allocated to certain programs. You can change the percentage of our level of clean energy we provide, the percentage of clean RPS or carbon-free. So there are some levers that the board has at its disposal. But we want to be. We don't want to put ourselves in a difficult position to the extent we can plan ahead for that. So that's where the risk management comes in.
Right. I mean, we don't want those rates to fluctuate too much. I mean, 4% is only a good number that we could tell our neighbors that don't use PG&E, use us. We're always cheaper by a lot, right?
Yes.
Then the follow-up question I have is regarding the fixed income. Now that we have about $200 million or so in the reserves, and you're able to move into some interest-bearing account to generate. And last I saw, I think with the Federal Reserve raising the rates, I've seen even little guys like us, we could get close to 4% now on the CD out there in the market. So I would imagine even 5%, according to Director Rennie. So with a couple $100 million, I mean that's not a small chunk, right? I mean at 4%, that's about $8 million a year. So I just want to say, with the amount of money we have, I'm sure we have pretty good negotiating power. So I just want to make sure that's what you meant, that the $3 million is actually low at this point, and you do see significantly more coming from that, right?
Yeah. So if you remember last year, we updated our investment policy. We asked the board to update the investment policy, and we hired a portfolio manager, PFM Asset Management. We're in the process of having them manage the funds, and we asked for several things. We asked to set up a account with CAMP, California Asset Management Program, and the yield on that has been running somewhere around 4.7, 4.5, 4.8. That explains the $3 million we're showing. Mm-hmm. We haven't yet moved money into PFM because one, we're getting a very good return on CAM, but part of the reason is we are still working out some of the details. We have to get a custodial bank signed, and we ran an RFP, and there's some issues there that we're trying to resolve. We'll be doing that very quickly, but we're still getting a very good return, pretty comparable to, I think, what PFM said they will be getting with them as well. But that's, we'll be pursuing that strategy that we worked out with the board.
Great, thank you. That's all I have.
Thank you. Let's hear from Director Klein and then Chua. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I really, like this presentation. It's painting a very rosy picture. That being said, looking at the risks, and I was surprised that I know we don't have a figure for the penalty, but we don't even have a placeholder at this point. So for like a mid-year budget update, do we have any idea when the penalty comes through, how quickly we need to pay that back? And is there any kind of recourse as far as, let's say, disputing that number in any way?
Yeah, it's actually in the budget, in the 74 million, the media budget. We didn't label it as penalty. We labeled it as RA cost.
Okay, that.
And we actually took a conservative approach because we're still attempting to mitigate our open position. We're still looking to the marketplace to see what products we can buy to fulfill the month-ahead obligations we have on the RA. And those prices are actually trading at higher than where the penalty would come in. And so we have modeled it at those prices. The penalties are somewhere around 17.5 million. And the market price that of which we've accounted for in the budget is close to 32 million. So rather than account penalty at 17.5 million, we're accounting for it at 32 million.
Okay, so thank you for that, because I was looking specifically for penalty or tying that to what we were talking about previously. I'm hoping, hopefully it isn't that much, and thank you for taking that conservative view as far as that's concerned. As Director Lee was talking about on the rates, and I do think luckily we did go farther as far as rates are concerned for the 4%, not knowing that the PUC would be more generous with PG&E than what we actually thought. How quickly that money accrues is actually very good for us, of course. Have we seen any uptick on customers? How closely we monitor that, and our plans as far as promoting that?
So we actually have a very good customer participation. We're close to more than 96% of customers are with us.
Mm-hmm.
And it's highest, if not the highest, in the CCA community. And that's part of the reason why we want to maintain the discount. We want our customers to love us, and we want that participation rate that we're getting. So
Okay.
we're doing very well on that front.
But yeah, and that's great news, and I hope that our customers do love us. And and hitting that 96% is great. Is there outreach to that final 4%? Is that because a deal is a deal. 1% was a minimal deal. 4% now becomes noticeable, especially with the prices that are there. And so, just wondering what the organization is doing to kind of reach that. And I know some of them are business customers and had, let's say, special deals with PG&E, but just wondering from that standpoint.
Yeah, so I'll add something, and Rich probably. So Don and Adam and his team, they're working with innovative programs to attract customers. If you remember the Google, that's a new load that we attracted.
Mm-hmm.
So their initiative on that side to attract customers that are not part of our customer portfolio, to bring that direct access load to our portfolio. So there's that initiative, and that's going to continue. And when you have rate offerings like these, it only helps in that initiative. So that will continue. And I'm pretty sure our marketing team is going to, I think we've already sent this message out on the rates.
ditto on everything that Amrit said. We'll take a look at the residential outreach. The commercial outreach we definitely are looking at, but we'll take another look at residential.
And I appreciate that. I think even with the 4%, and I think it's heralding that 4% more because, people are complaining about the combined cost and whether or not that's gas or electric or whatever. They're just seeing higher prices, and whatever we can say that we're trying to do our part only makes them love us more. And so yeah, I appreciate that, and I appreciate your take on where we stand fiscally. So thank you. That's all I have.
Thank you, Chair. This is actually related to your feedback, and I think it's slide 6. I think I just need some clarification on. So we have this increase in effective January 2023, right there. Perfect. So how does it actually translates into dollars in terms of our residents? If you look at it at a resident's lens, how much are we talking about?
So this is a system average, weighted average rate, 14.08 cents. Each customer has their own rate.
Right.
So PG&E has a tariff sheet for each customer rate classes, residential that are on different rate plans. Some customers may be on EV rates, some may be time of use rates. Most are time of use, some may still be on the old tiered rate. So they have their rates. This we take a weighted average to illustrate the concept, but basically we take those rates and we reduce it by 4%.
So can you give an example so when somebody asks me, I can kind of give the same example? Like if they're paying $100 now, with the increase effective January 1st, how much would that be?
So that'll be 4% of that.
With the new increase?
Yeah.
I thought we reduced it by 4%.
If they're the 4% is baked in there. They would have paid 4% higher.
Oh.
So 1.04 times that had they been with PG&E.
Mm-hmm.
But you got to be careful. We only charge the generation piece, not the total. So when a customer sees the bill, they don't really say what's a generation, what's the transmission distribution. They see their total bill.
Mm-hmm.
We only and generation is typically about 50% of their bill.
Okay.
50%.
Yeah, roughly.
So I can say
thereabouts.
like if your bill right now is 100, it should have been 104. Thank you to SVCEA. It's
Exactly.
reduced by $4.
Exactly.
Perfect. Thank you.
If the generation was 104.
Okay.
Yeah.
Got it. Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Okay. Go back to Director Lee.
I apologize, just looking at the chart there, just to make sure I understood. So the rate that we used to charge was $12.69 per kilowatt, and the diagram shows that we're charging now 14.08, right? But then there's another 0.28 of the PCIA. The customer pays 14.36, or do they pay 14.08?
The customer pays 14.08. I'm getting confused. Sorry. No, yeah, they would pay they would pay the 14.08 plus the
Plus the 28
Yeah.
cents, right? So because
yeah.
that's
So
exactly 4%.
So the difference between that and
Right.
as illustrated in the graph is 4%.
Got it, yeah, okay.
Yeah.
So the actual rate that there, so 14.36.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Our revenue, what we collect is 14.08.
Correct.
It's just that the 0.28 goes to PG&E.
That's right.
Uh, yeah.
Thank you very much for the clarification.
And just to clarify, the rates you're showing here are the generation rates, and that the total bill a customer is paying includes the distribution of the things. And so I'm going to try a different tack on your answer to Director Chua. If a customer is paying $100 with us, they probably would have paid about $102 with PG&E, being roughly 4%
50%.
difference on half of it.
Yeah.
Am I right?
Yeah.
Okay. There, did I confuse everybody? Okay, not everybody. Not everybody. So it's better, but we're not trying to bring in these other things that we have no hand in the transmission, but in terms of a total dollar, which is what a customer is going to see. And I don't know if there's anybody out there that understands every page of their bill. Okay, let's face it. So the simpler we can make it for people, I think that'd be better. Did we hand other? I don't see any comments. How about from the Zoom? And welcome, Director Martinez Beltran. Good to see you. I just had one question, and it had to do with when you're talking about risk, and I didn't see in that list total demand. And I was just thinking about when Girish was talking about people coming back to the office, which we're all hearing about, and we saw a dip in demand when the pandemic started, but now the level of activity is back. And I'm just thinking, what are our assumptions, say, when you're showing that 20, 24, 25? In a general sense, what are we assuming in terms of level of economic activity and demand?
So this assumes fairly stable with slight increases. I don't have the numbers in front of me. There's slight growth in demand year over year, but it's not a substantial amount at this point. But in our stress test analysis, we would look at what if the demand dips, and there we'll take a look and see. We may include a demand drop, or we may not. And the reason for that, in stress tests we tend to be conservative. If our operating margin is negative, then we will probably not model the demand drop component, because that would improve the bottom line. If we were serving at a loss, having a lower customer base actually is better than selling more unit at a loss. So, but we will look at those scenarios, and we did look at those scenarios last year as well.
Thank you. Was that okay? Go ahead, Director Mekachak.
I couldn't help but smile when I saw slide 10 with the reserves, because I was thinking when I saw the Hoover Dam in November for the first time, it didn't quite look like that. But anyways, I was wondering in the future if you could show kind of a 10-year or 8-year horizon on what you think the volumes are going to be for SVCE in total megawatt sales. Because I'm just wondering, when people ask me certain questions, our constituents, like what's going on with power and the move to electrification of the home plus more EVs. So that was just, in the future, that would be kind of nice to see what our increase in sales are going to be over the next 8 to 10 years. And then I also was kind of thinking that our year end is September 30th, and it kind of makes it difficult because of when PG&E comes out with their rate structure, and the PCIA is like in December. So we kind of have it. We've made it difficult for ourselves, but it just is what it is.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, one thing on the sales, our integrated resource plan, I believe, includes these projections, the demand growth. So we have those numbers. We can.
Yeah, just a visual, so we can always kind of keep seeing what's our growth going to be looking like. And I think we're looking for growth through electrification.
Yes, and that's actually Monica's group and Amber's group and Justin focusing on what is that load growth going to be when we think about electrification and existing buildings, what our plans are for that. It's a really difficult number to predict at this point, but we have made a guess, and so we'll share that with you.
Okay.
I'd say over the next few years we'll just continuously update it. Hopefully that uncertainty band will come down a little bit.
Great. I'm not picking up any other comments or questions. Oh, there we go. Director Mohan.
So my question may not be directly linked to the budget, but it's a question nevertheless. When at the last meeting we talked about the penalties, and I think they were associated with SVC's inability to purchase sufficient capacity. So has anything changed between then and now? And if not, has anything changed for a future trend for the next year?
No, resource adequacy is a very difficult product to procure. The costs are very high. So in this budget, we have included the high costs of resource adequacy. The earlier question was, did we include the penalty? And what I mentioned is that we're still trying to close our position, in other words, go in the market and procure, so that we don't incur the penalties or some of the penalties. The penalties are somewhere around $17.5 million, but the market price of filling the open position is $32 million. And in the budget, we took the conservative approach and used the higher number of $32 million.
Okay, so that accounted for the penalties, but what about the ability to purchase additional capacity or sufficient capacity?
So yeah, so that's baked into the market price. So the way we look at the ability to fill the position is what is the market price? The market price is extremely high right now. So we take that price and bake it into our budget. So that reflects the market condition, the supply-demand condition of that of capacity.
If I may add to that, one of the contracts I told you we're going to be bringing to you next month will satisfy some of that capacity we have to purchase. And that'll likely be a 10-year or a little longer contract. So that'll take care of some of our needs. Just today, our trade association was up at Sacramento talking to legislators about what's going on with this capacity market. The capacity market has margins that are razor thin. And in fact, some of the numbers that we have calculated show there's an actual deficit in the system. So we continue to put RFPs out to purchase capacity. The discussion we had at the board last month was very useful in giving us that kind of encouragement to go ahead and get this long-term contract in place. So I think we'll be taking a good bite out of future deficits. Just to add to this complexity, in the year 2025, there's a whole new reliability construct that's going to be implemented. And this long-term contract that we'll bring to you will have a lot more value for us. So we continue to make efforts to buy capacity in this very razor-thin margins. There just isn't very much. So one of the few options we have is to lock in for long-term. And so that's what you'll be seeing. So I think there are two answers. Maybe you're asking is like, what are you doing to buy capacity?
Right.
That's what we're saying. And then how much money are we setting aside in our budget? So
Right.
we're doing that too.
Yeah. No, thank you. I got both those questions answered. Thanks.
Great.
Very good. Director Rennie?
Are you ready for a motion, Chair?
I am ready.
All right, well, let me make a motion that we adopt Resolution 2023-04 in our packet, which approves the mid-year 2022 to 2023 and adjust our operating budget that projects depositing $73.4 million into reserves.
I second.
Oh, we had Director Walia, Vice Chair Walia. Yes? Okay. Did I forget to take it public comment? I did. Do we have any public comment? I didn't see any here in the room. Is there any on Zoom?
And no hands raised, Chair.
All right, no public comments, so then we have a motion and a second, so we're ready for a roll call vote.
Yes. Thank you. Chair Tyson,
Yes.
Vice Chair Walia,
Aye.
Scozola,
Aye.
Mohan,
Aye.
Meadows,
Aye.
Rennie,
Aye.
Chua,
Aye.
Makachuk,
Aye.
Abekoga,
Aye.
Klein,
Aye.
Lee,
Aye.
Hilton,
Aye.
Martinez Beltran.
Aye.
Thank you. That motion carries unanimously.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Amrit. I thought that was a very clear presentation.
Thank you.
Let's move on now to board member announcements and direction on future agenda items. Let me just raise one point to bring to your attention. The Bay Area Air Quality Management District is having a meeting on March 15th to discuss Bay Area District standards for zero NOx emissions from heaters and water heaters. And I understand that the direction on this, the vote isn't necessarily that clear. So some groups are looking for positive speakers on this. I have signed up myself to be such a person, and our organization here has written a letter in support of this measure. I'm sorry I don't have the details right in front of me, but in effect, have you got more?
Who's actually going to make
Oh,
that
great.
notice?
Director
That's all right.
Abekoga, go ahead, take it from there.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, so next Wednesday, both Member Lee and myself serve on the BACMed board, and we will be looking at Regulation 9, Rule 4, and Regulation 9, Rule 6, which relate to nitrogen oxides from space heaters, furnaces, and then the other is water heaters. So as you may know, these sources, gas sources, generate a substantial portion of nitrogen oxide emissions, which have very detrimental health impacts. And so the rule amendment is basically to ban the replacement of these gas appliances starting in 2027. It'll be phased over several years. So yes, SVCE sent a letter of support. We are still taking input, so please feel free to email us. The other two members of our South Bay delegation are Sergio Lopez from Campbell and Vicky Vinker from Palo Alto. Thank you.
Great. Do we have any other? Director Klein, go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. So the Sunnyvale City Hall will be opening up later this month, and it was partially funded through at least the solar panels and the battery backup through this organization. There will be a ribbon cutting on Monday, April 3rd at 9:30 in the morning, and so the board and SVCE will be getting an invitation. There'll be a bigger celebration in the fall when after all the other buildings are torn down and we have 6 acres of open space that'll be there, but there'll be at least a quick ribbon cutting beginning of April and kind of as construction continues. But it's what I've seen in the building so far is just fantastic, and want to make sure that look for that invite coming into your inboxes. So hopefully you can make it.
Very exciting.
Thank you.
Thank you for that. Do we have any other board member announcements? Director Chua?
Thank you, Chair. I just want to announce that our Energy and Environmental Sustainability Commission is busy prepping for Earth Day, April 22nd in Milpitas. So come one, come all. Thank you.
Another fine event. Do we have Director Lee?
Yes, I just want to confirm with our council that there's certainly no conflict from me or member Director Abekoga to vote on this issue next Wednesday on the BACMed board. Right? Correct? I just want to get the A-OK.
Yeah, we highly support it.
Okay,
I
thank
think
you.
we are leaders. We want to continue to be leaders.
Right, and I just want to mention this is about NOx. It's not about greenhouse gases, actually,
Yes.
and that some folks are kind of concerned about natural gas in their stove. This is nothing to do with their stove. We're not taking anybody's stoves away. That has become a very political hot potato. This is really about replacement of like water heaters and things like that. I just want to make that point clear. Thank you.
Great. Thank you for that. Yes.
Yes, I'm on the Santa Clara County Recycling and Solid Waste Reduction Commission, as is Director Klein. And we had an agenda item that was on biogas, and I just wanted to make sure that the link is there with Silicon Valley Clean Energy so that what they're thinking of doing and meeting the requirements, that there could be an opportunity for SVCE. And I would just ask that maybe you take a look at the report, staff report, and kind of get plugged into that, because it wasn't totally clear to me. I'm just raising that as maybe an opportunity.
So this is an opportunity with the solid waste?
Yeah, because they've got an obligation to take some of the solid waste and create biogas.
Oh, this is the AB 1383? SB 1383?
No, it was supposed to be on the agenda for a presentation, but it wasn't. They didn't make it.
Okay.
But it's just, I just wrote it down, talked to SVCE about it. So that's why I want to make sure that you take a look at that and connect the dots. Maybe there's nothing there, but it may be an opportunity.
Okay. Maybe you can provide me that information.
Sure.
Thank you.
All right, I don't see any other comments. I don't see any from our group, a remote group. So with that, I want to thank everybody for participating, and have a lovely evening, and we are hereby adjourned.
Chair, I think Director Martinez-Beltran did have a comment.
Oh, I couldn't tell. Oh, look, yeah, there it is. Okay. All right, I unadjourn. Is that a word?
Thank you, Chair. Sorry, I didn't, my hand isn't so visible there. I'll have to work on that. I just wanted to share that AAUW and our young women's leaders, which being that today is International Women's Day, was very appropriate. On the 28th of Tuesday, they had an experts talk on climate change with Carrie Hall from NBC Bay Area, the meteorologist, a local architect, Leslie Miles, talking about LEED accredited buildings, and then also Maddie Kangas from Monarch Butterfly Conservation Planner, and they all got together to talk about what's going on. And I just wanted to make sure that that I shared that with everybody. It was a great talk. So thank you, and led by our youth. So that's important too.
Great, thank you. Thank you for that final thought. With that, I unadjourn.